Thanks very much. We're just, I apologize for bringing a Mac. We're just hooking that up right now. And actually, Andrew, this dongle right here on the table is what you need. It's a high margin Apple product. Those guys are no dummies. So I am Matt Eyring, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer of Vivint. And we're one of the Silicon Valley companies. I'll tell you a little bit about Vivint in just a second. But I am new to Utah 5 years after being 20 years in Boston and starting a company called InnoSight with Clay Christensen and a few other folks, which did strategy consulting, but based on some of the principles that Clay talked about, not last night, although I endorse those principles heartily. But we talked a little bit about how companies can create organic growth and billion-dollar businesses. And so I came here to take over strategy and essentially product for Vivint. We have an innovation center out in Lehigh, which is a growing area under construction, as you know. We have about 400 engineers, designers, artificial intelligence data scientists, back-end, front-end, mechanical engineers, hardware folks, and others building products in the smart home space. We essentially, I'll just go through this slide in a sentence or two. We are, if you think of a software as a service business, a SaaS business is not including hardware. If you sort of add hardware to that, which is you install all these devices in the home which are connected to the internet, and you charge a recurring monthly revenue in a subscription model, we're sort of smart home as a service. So instead of buying a one-off device off the shelf, you're actually hitting the easy button, having everything installed, getting a full system, having it monitored, having someone roll a truck if something's not going on. And we do about $1 billion, a little bit more of recurring revenue every year. And it's a great business with margins, service margins sort of 70%. So it's a good SaaS-like business. And I wanted to start off with the framework. So Professor Bryce and his colleagues have been out, and Steve talked a little bit about acquisition, and I admire both the guts and the brains of guys like him who do that. We're a company that is private equity backed. Blackstone owns us, and have focused primarily on organic growth, and that's the reason I came, which was essentially to try to take some of those consulting principles and move them into action. How do you actually start? How do you find ideas? How do you turn those into early stage pilots? How do you grow those and add a lot of value to your enterprise? So I'm going to talk about organic growth within an enterprise. And this on the left, if you've been in the Valley a long time, I haven't been here, more than 5 years, but there was a company called Apex in the corner. So I'm literally, this is a business that started in the most humble, of ways, as a security, and even before that, pest control, door knocking operation. And so if you think about that, and I put that in the lower left quadrant there of the model, just to start off saying, well, that's your starting point. And what do you do from there? I think that's kind of an interesting starting point. If you sort of said, hey, we need to look at options on cost, capability, and customer experience, what do you do? The first major move, and so I'll just sort of chart the path of this business, was to build smart homes. So I think one of the things that the founders did in a smart way said, hey, security is already using remote sensors to talk to a central hub that is then wirelessly and also through Wi-Fi connected to the cloud. This is early. This is before any of the Silicon Valley activity that you see. What if we just added a bunch of other devices? Could we remotely control a thermostat? Could we control a camera? Could we control other devices? And so if you look on this cost capability x-axis, you're really just moving exactly along that line, and there was a lot of value added there. The business started out as I think a $50 million business and was sold to Blackstone for $2 billion. And so there was a lot of value through the very simple thing of saying, hey, with the same costs and capabilities, we could get into the Internet of Things by adding some of these services, and that was a successful move. Vivint Solar, if you look quickly to your left heading north, you'll see a Vivint Solar building. That was another spin-off for capital structure reasons. That business couldn't be within the debt covenants of the Vivint Solar proper, and so that's just the notion, hey, we have these installers, we have this sales capability, could we be selling an adjacency like solar? And that's a business I put a little bit higher on customer experience, because perhaps you can sell to the same base that has some experience with the interface. And so that business IPO'd and was successful. And then, as I showed up, we went into internet, fixed wireless, internet service provider. We had started up when I came along, and we'll talk a little bit about some lessons I've learned from some of these things. Let me just click through quickly. A commercial business, which is, hey, why don't we sell to small and medium businesses? They should be a lot like these residential customers. There's a partnership with Airbnb, which is, hey, people have to exchange these keys. Wouldn't it be great if you could have a Vivint system? The AI could actually tell you, hey, you're on vacation right now. You could have earned $2,000 while you were gone. Oh, hit this button. Don't have to exchange keys. People show up. The doorbell shows that it's 2 people and not 20 people for a big party. Great, you're able to let them in. You don't have to physically be there. You can lock up afterwards. You can set the house to an Airbnb customer's personalized settings, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one that you could sell to your current customer base, uses capabilities perhaps. Let's see here. That says property management. What about apartments? And you'll see Dwello and other local companies here. Couldn't you leverage some of the capabilities just to sell to apartment units? Best Buy, which is there a new retail point of sale, new locations that we could get into. Space Monkey, so this is the one of a couple of acquisitions that we did, and this was around, hey, we already have cameras, we could offer DVR as another service. They're already attuned to the interface, we already have those capabilities. That turned out to be a really good bet. So I look at the chart here, and I asked myself, well, what do I learn and what do I take away? And I think the concept is absolutely outstanding. There's a little bit of, I don't know, Bain-esque profit from the core on the x-axis. But this notion actually that your customers have interfaces and there's brand investments that you can capitalize on, I think is extremely useful and interesting. I guess one thing is you'll notice there's not a lot of customer experience complementarity yet. Some things aren't as far along the X or Y axis as I would like to see them. And I thought what I do is just be honest with you about organic growth and the issues that we faced, at least for an audience like this. I'll show you where I started out when I was a consultant. This is an article in the Harvard Business Review written by quote-unquote experts, me and Clark Gilbert and I, on beating the odds when you launch a new venture. And it's not bad. The editor said that it at least was in the running for whatever you call the HBR, the McKinsey Award or whatever, and it had a little bit of a framework where you figure out customer value proposition, the profit model, resources, processes, and then you test and learn. But the little twist was you need to prioritize the assumptions correctly. So you want to put your deal killer risks and the risks that we call path dependent first. Path dependent meaning it's going to change in a big way which way the venture is going to go. And that'll create, because you're reducing those biggest risks, it'll create disproportionate value. And you want to be careful that those top risks don't end up later in the chain, which is you're reducing risks that really don't matter as much, and then all of a sudden you're hitting deal killers late. And then we talked about creating a plan to learn, a discovery-driven plan, sort of the Reed and McGrath work that talks about, from Columbia, about taking a reverse P&L, putting in your assumptions, testing those things. And I wanted to talk about, this is a metaphor, this isn't actually a picture of me, perhaps in the future, but this is a calm-looking, consultant-like person who's wise and writing HBR articles. And here's kind of the current version, which is dirt on the face. This person's only dreaming about going to see Blackstone every 3 months and having to report out on like how much you spent and how's it actually going. So I wanted to talk to you really quickly about real life lessons, not from somebody who's knows it all or has had an inordinate amount of success, but certainly I think has learned a lot in this process. So, 4 lessons, and I might add one other today as a bonus. So the first lesson is push back even when you don't have the upper hand. So a lot of the deals you'll do, and especially these partnerships, are going to require negotiation at the start, and you'll take a look at things as sharing fixed costs, sharing profits, distribution, pricing, the way you go to market at retail, and you'll get in these negotiations as we have, and you'll find out, you know, they're demanding 3 or 4 things that I don't want to give in on, and I'm sure are going to doom this thing, but or not sure they're going to doom this thing, or make it very difficult, you know. But I want to get this deal done, and it's a little bit. Steve said this truism that I've burned into my brain, which is look out for your motives when your gut is telling you that it doesn't make sense when you've got a deal, which is, people are going to look at me, it's not going to look good, or man, this is a big partner and I want to get this thing done. Even when you're a little guy, if you know that scaling nationwide or pricing a certain way or positioning in stores in a certain way is not the right thing to do, this is for organic growth, don't do it. Turn the deal down, no matter who it is. Lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is leave plenty of room in your model for bogeys. You're going to do modeling, and there's going to be a temptation when the numbers don't look good to sharpen the pencil to senior management and make them look good. Things can and will go wrong in unexpected ways in your modeling. And I can think of many of the ventures that we had on that page where cost didn't come down in the way we thought. Sales density doesn't look like you think. Quality takes longer to figure out than you anticipated. And the model needs to be fairly flexible to take account for those things. If you think you're going to be getting par and bogeys, if you think you're going to be getting par and birdies and some eagles on most of the holes in your plan, that's a danger sign at the start. Going along with that, don't over-index on early data. You're looking at this saying, who are these people? What is this? These are, this is, I think, Vanilla Ice, Smash Mouth. You're a rock star, or you're an all-star. Smash Mouth, Call Me Maybe, and Who Let the Dogs Out. So these are one-hit wonders. And I'll just say that one of the things that you'll see in your early pilots is almost always the data is going to come back 20 or 30 or 40% better than it will in steady state. So we've never had a pilot that we've run, so solar, wireless, retail sales, anything else, where that first test wasn't absolutely a one-hit wonder. It wasn't phenomenal. You can't believe the volume they're doing in San Antonio. You can't believe what customers want in this, or what we're able to sell this at what price. The models because of a mixture of the Westinghouse effect, which is just the CEO is texting the people involved in the pilot. It's got a lot of attention on it. You've got your best people. You haven't worked out all the kinks. Perhaps you're cheating on some variables. You're not using the real Salesforce compensation that you're going to use, or you're allowing more cost than you're going to eventually use. Almost always when you're creating a brand new organic venture, you are going to have some one-hit wonders at the start. You're going to have overperformance. And if I was an academic and I was wanting to get published, I would probably quantify that. But my gut guess is adjust down around 30% from whatever you see in the first test. Is that about right? I'm looking at some of the people who have scars on them that work with us, and they're nodding their heads. Okay, so be really careful about early data and one-hit wonders. Safely get what you need from the core. So back in the days when I was purely getting paid for speeches like this, well, not that I want to get paid for speeches like this, but I'm saying I actually was out telling people and consulting on what to do versus just having to purely get the results. You know, I'd say things like separate the venture completely from the core, so it doesn't have any interference. Life is a little more messy than that. Most of the ventures that you're going to start in your companies and in your practices are going to have to both retain some degree of separation from the core, autonomy, but also draw from its resources. And so you need to be very, very good at drawing the resources you need while avoiding pressure from the core to become something that you shouldn't be, or just getting ignored by the core. And that's a real skill and an on-the-ground talent, which is getting the resources from the core, but not having overly dictated the model of the core on the new startup. And folks like Clay and especially Clark Gilbert have based a lot of their work as he transformed the newspaper industry, the Deseret News and other places, and brought some of that to BYU, Idaho and other places, which is how do you both pull from the core what you need without having pushed on you the things that you don't want, and frankly, how do you just navigate, this is not meant to make a statement about the Supreme Court, this is just represents bureaucracy right now, and how do you navigate getting the resources that you need? And then the final thing that I would say, if I added one more rule, is just to avoid fixed costs as much as you can. We used to teach in a ballroom like this 12 years ago. I remember getting up and giving the Iridium case study. Has anyone ever studied the Motorola Iridium case study? Dave Sundahl raised his hand, just one of you. No boats, no case studies. Okay, so I have a hard time believing on the boats, by the way. I'm just saying right now for this group. I saw you all looking at each other. I don't have a boat, how about you? Me neither, I'll see you down at Powell. You guys we'll get into this later. I don't believe that, but none of you have read the Motorola Iridium case study. What is iridium? What is the atomic number of iridium? Does anybody know? Come on. We got PhDs in this room. It's 77, I think. I was a physics major for 1 year. That's it. Motorola started this company around, I think, late 90s. I don't know when its earliest genesis was, that was going to launch L-band voice and data low Earth orbit satellites. Do you remember this? Do any of you remember this? All right, some of you remember this. You're warming up. All right. On lesson number 5, I look at Iridium. We used to give this case study, and 77 is the atomic number. It's the number of satellites you have to get up for this business to kind of work, okay? So in the geosynchronous orbit. It was this phenomenal service that if you were on Everest, or especially on the North and South Pole, you'd get excellent service through your cell phones. And the only issue is you've got to launch 77 of these things. We'll call it Iridium. They actually only launched 66, so I don't know if they had to change the name and what atomic number corresponds to that. But I always used to sit while we taught this case study, I think for another topic. It was, I don't know if it was operations management or what the point of the case was, but I always used to think, whoever was in charge of that must have just been like petrified, and what a great study it is for maybe another lesson 5 on the ground, which is avoid fixed costs as much as you can just because of the constraints it provides. And if I made another slide, it'd be of a pole vaulter just straining to get over the top, because if you have 66 satellites to the tune of about $5 billion up there, and then you start trying to sell your radios, does anybody know the end of this story? It actually worked pretty well. It was large, but it turned out that they couldn't get enough volume at the prices they needed to charge. But that must have been a heck of a meeting once those satellites were up there, right? I mean, it must have been like, hey, people aren't going to buy enough at high enough prices, and you know, okay, what do we do? So I've lived this lesson 5 on a smaller scale than 5. If I had done that, I wouldn't be here before you, I'll guarantee you that. But which is, if you can push most of the cost variable, especially early stage, one is you're a bit trapped. I mean, you're going to have to get the volumes that you have to get. The model is not flexible, it breaks other rules. The other is the crater that it leaves upon impact once it hits the wall is absolutely enormous, and part of a new venture organic growth mechanism is the ability to live another day. That's not always possible. I understand if you've got a pharma startup or other types of startups that you're going to have to look at things differently. But those are the 5 lessons that I've learned. So I think that I hope that you could do a couple things. One is just map your own business on the framework, on the cost and customer interfaces, and see where you are. See what decisions you're making, see where the portfolio is, and then if you're not getting the results you expect, the 5 hard-won lessons from the trenches that we've talked about today have been helpful for me as we go to the next step of trying to create billion-dollar businesses, and I hope are also helpful for you. Thanks a lot.